Welcome to another episode of Behind the Shield podcast. I'm your host, Gary Daemer, and today we have a guest from the West Coast of the United States, Michael Schroeder. So how about you give me just a brief overview of who you are and what you're about? Keep it to very short time periods. I know we both can talk a lot, so I'm only kidding.
Yeah,
But as long as you want to take, man.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me on the show. I definitely watch most of the episodes a couple of times each.
Okay, cool.
I spent the last 5 years working inside of VA in the Digital Transformation Center, which is the org that does FedRAMP. And I had a really great opportunity there advising OIT leadership and CSPs, interacting with a ton of systems that were going through FedRAMP agency sponsorship. And then, that was a pretty big body of work I left behind there. And I decided to look for a new adventure earlier this year. Um, so I found myself with Excentium, which is a fantastic company and cool people. We can talk a little bit about them. But outside of work, I'm a single dad. I've got a teenager and a almost 22-year-old.
Wow.
And yeah, it's an adventure. That's the real adventure of life is those kids.
So, Mike, how about explaining what your company does since you're fairly new to it? Maybe you can give us just a brief overview of the company as well.
Yeah, as we're recording this, I'm a couple days away from my my 1 month anniversary with
There you go.
Excentium, and the company turns 20 this year. Right, our
Wow.
founder, Colin Corlett, built the company in 2006. He came from serving DHA, Defense
Okay.
Health Agency. This is an SDVOSB, a service
Hmm.
disabled veteran owned small business. And he came from technical trenches, right? He really feels that's where our company's credibility is still anchored. Um, Founding and still a thread through every contract and announcement we make is that our goal is that security and compliance don't need to be roadblocks to growth. And a
Hmm.
lot of industry can see it that way, right? Why do I have to do these things? Well, it builds security, leads to growth.
There you
And
go.
that principle's right in the operating logic. So another key part of our company is Rick Verrill, who leads our compliance and risk area and also leads a lot on security. I He's got a stack of credentials. I just a lot, and some that I didn't know existed, and I've looked into and are really, really interesting. Like he's a fellow of the Health Information Management Systems
Wow.
Society, deep health cyber history in the industry. Um, and so over a decade and a half, Credential Stack was built, right? FedRAMP 3 PAO, we're GovRAMP 3 PAO. We got 4 ISO accreditations, CMMI level 2, CMMC level 2 certified. We're in GSA Mass, and we're across all 5 subcategories for hacks for the uh, and so we're in Higher Vets Platinum Awards multiple years in a row.
Wow.
And that's before Fatima Corlett joined as the Chief Growth Officer and is our COO. And she's got 20 years in the federal GovCon environment, working with SAIC, Leidos, HP. She was with Oracle. And her mandate is growth that's aligned with our founding thesis that, security is the work.
There you go.
When they actually came to me and they described the role, what they were describing was a chance to put their 20 years of company credibility into the FedRAMP 20X conversation. And for me to put my knowledge into being able to expand this organization. We're not the most productive 3PAO in the FedRAMP marketplace, and we're currently
Neither will
seeking
we. We had
C3PAO.
0, by the way.
So we've got, after 20X, we've got 3. And so creds are there. We've got the credential stack. It's incredible. The relationships are there. The work's available. It's out there, right? And
Yep.
so
Yep.
my real role, well, I'm director of FedRAMP strategy and market development. Thank you for the opportunity to fulfill my role here. My role is to add the voice of Excentium to the conversation.
Cool.
That's
Cool.
the work. And it's really, really interesting that all of these things trace back to this overarching reducing vulnerabilities in the nation's cyber infrastructure. That's
I love it.
everyday goal.
I love it. Sounds like our companies are fairly similar in nature. We're very technical based as well. I'm one of those guys that have about 1,000 certifications as well. And although I've said this year that I'm going to let most of them go and focus on continuing to grow the company as well. So we've been in business for 19 years. We are a veteran-owned business. I was very fortunate to never have been injured in the military, so we don't have the service disabled perspective. And then we're also a hub zone company as well, so a small business as well. So we should talk more on
You
that part
should.
of it as well. So cool.
Absolutely. Um, but yeah, I'm really focused on FedRAMP, on process and policy, on educating folks. I like to educate in public on LinkedIn, right? And I like to learn in public as well as I'm learning new things, engaging in big conversation with whomever will join in with their expertise so I could learn more. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, I find myself, I'm not very much of a written person who likes to write in public, but I do like to talk in public. I always like to say I have a third grade education in the English side. I'm an engineer by trade, a bachelor's degree and master's degree. So very logically thinking. So my written word is never as good as my spoken word. I think I can debate a lot better logically and fast. So I like to see that because I do see a lot of your activity, in the new public forum that we have for FedRAMP, as well. So, let's start off by, the experience that you had, say, in the previous FedRAMP regime to where we're at today. And I would love to be able to talk about that public discourse part, right? Because I think to me that is one of the best parts that you see happening within the new FedRAMP space. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I am incredibly grateful and excited about the way that not only the FedRAMP PMO, but other organizations are reaching out. Other agencies that have authoritative control over the work we do are reaching out for input from industry. And in working all my FedRAMP experience is inside of VA. And
Mhm.
working there, I really couldn't have a lot of public discourse, right?
Right.
There's
Mhm.
limitations to how I can communicate about what I'm doing. But when FedRAMP opened up 20X, I dove right in for the
Right.
contract that I worked at. And for my own personal edification and to make great relationships. That's about the time I met you, Gary,
Yep. Yep.
directly. And uh, the process of capturing input from industry was just so robust, right? So that opportunity to talk about my ideas about how FedRAMP could be improved and to give just precise and sort of incisive insight on the proposals was
Right.
really great. I know not just for me, for everybody who took part. And I know that there were a lot of folks who captured more than their own personal ideas to share
Right.
as feedback in the RFC process.
I know we
But
borrowed a few of
yeah,
people's ideas, I'm just saying.
yeah, certainly. Yeah, I totally captured a lot of folks that they were
Yep.
posting in public and I didn't see them in the forums there and yeah, their ideas were good. I might have included them in my own, right?
I
Uh
yeah, I'm proud to say that we did include some of other people's ideas, and that was the whole idea behind this. This new process for FedRAMP, bringing it out into the open, stop making it non-transparent. We've been through both phases of the pilot and, got obtained FedRAMP authorization and both, sorry, FedRAMP certification in both
I
of
was
those
going to
now.
get you there, but yeah.
Oh, please do. I would have got a laugh out of it,
Right. Yeah,
for sure.
certification
Yeah,
is tough. It's
yeah,
it's a it's same
the language
syllables.
somewhat is going to be as a change as well, right? So it makes it a little difficult. So that whole new regime of how information's flowing is so much better, and we've been doing this for a long time, and we've been through quite a few different agencies. We've been through the JAB process, we've been through the DoD process, and I have to say that this is the cleanest view that I've seen in a long time for FedRAMP, especially for commercial organizations trying to go through this process. You know, the old regime, there was definitely some black box, information going on. If you weren't quite involved in it, we were an advisor, so it was hard for us to see what all the other 3POs were doing. They also had some separate meetings with the 3PAOs about what they should be looking for, but didn't really meet with the advisors. So we ultimately became a 3PAO just so we could sit on the inside and listen to what they were telling the 3PAOs about what they should be doing and what they could be doing as well. And that did help. But I think really helped us more than anything else is we tried each case in the court of the FedRAMP PMO each time. And every time, and this is what we have to tell our customers, is we learn something different every single time. We got past the 11th step and they added a 12th step, or they added a 13th step, each time. So each time we went through this process, it was a bit difficult, but we always manage that gray. And I still think there's a lot of gray requirements in this, but I think those gray requirements now are more out in the open and can be discussed better.
Well, and I think that the gray requirements as well are on the other side of the equation right now, right? A lot of that gray was, well, we haven't seen that yet, so we can't define it. And the messaging there from under the old method, which is going to stick around, Rev 5's not going anywhere for a while, but the messaging was always, well, they don't have a solid answer. And since agencies were the sponsors and leading that process very heavily, agencies were more conservative. And so the answer was, yeah, we're not going to do that then, if there's not a clear, stark answer. And now it's more, yeah, we don't know. So let's try it. Let's see how it might work. So I think the gray still exists, probably even more vast now. While, class D is basically opaque to most people. And the way that certification versus authorization is aligned. I think that the gray area is now an opportunity instead of a limitation like it used to be. And being inside from the agency perspective, right? Building a program where, VA was the biggest contributor to the FedRAMP marketplace for sponsorships. And then we had another couple hundred systems that were authorized in already that were ingested and got agency ATO.
Right.
And there was difficulty even in that position with getting clear information and answers often.
Even from the agency side?
Even from the agency side.
Wow.
Because limited resources on both ends, right? From both agencies. And often due to the structure inside of an agency, which is just the way agencies are structured, right? And I've spoken to counterparts and tried to group think with folks in other agencies and similar organizations when I was there. Agencies have some strict structure. There's, separation of responsibilities towards different components that build the system security plan and ultimately the system security authorization package that some AO is going to make a decision on, is all of this robust and clear enough? But along the way, there's checkpoints from the agency perspective. And often the thing that we need to know might be gated not only behind an organization inside of the agency, but then how that information they hold applies and is interpreted by the FedRAMP PMO. So yeah, right now where not only is the PMO leading certification process, and that opens up that pathway for CSOs to be completely available to the agencies, everything happening in public and in the forums and being done with discussion instead of decree, I think is just fantastic. It allows practitioners, experts, very, very specific SMEs to put insight into processes that are going to affect all of us. Who may not have that sub-specific like privacy stuff. There's some CUI or rather privacy stuff that CMMC experts provided as insight on those forums and attention to the RFCs. And that may not be 100% applicable, but knowing that information is critical for the PMO to make a decision on what the rules are going to be.
So do you feel, this is a very crazy question, but I'll ask it anyway. Do you feel like we have more security now or less security? I mean, how do you feel about that?
So do we define security as a very strict set of obligations and requirements and checks that can be marked off? Because if so, we have less now. But if security is intentional institution of practices and methodologies that achieve the outcome of reducing vulnerabilities inside of these systems that are being used with our federal data, we're doing so much better. 20x is a much
See, to
better
me, that's
pathway for it.
exactly what it is. To me, that's exactly what it is. It's really more about, the security of the solution and the data. And it's not so much, did I write that control exactly right? Did I dot my I? Did I cross my T? Did I use the right words in there to make it past the reviewer, right? It's more,
And
show it to me right now, show it to me right now, show it to me right now.
right,
And then look
right.
at it in a total solution too, right? You can look at it in a total solution with the trust centers, especially the public trust centers that are out there. So
That's a huge change, right? That's
mhm.
magnificent. You can know that the product that you're going to think about bringing in as a solution, and that's not limited to the agencies who are the ultimate real customers to FedRAMP
Right.
products.
Mhm.
It's to all of the CSPs who are building an offering that is going to incorporate FedRAMP authorized or FedRAMP certified
Right, right.
tool sets,
It's
right?
gonna take us a while to get there,
It's
man.
going to
It's
take
gonna
us
take
so
a
long. Yeah. Well, and also we're talking about two separate things, right? They are technically still authorizations until June, and the
Yep.
consolidated rules are
Yep, till they can see our
live
come
in
out. Yep.
July.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, so that public facing trust centers are outstanding. I think that's one
Right.
of the greatest choices that providers have made along the way, and that is now institutionalized.
I tell you, when I first saw that requirement, I remember saying, "There's no way in the world I'm ever gonna do that. I forget this whole 20x thing. I'm not putting my security, out there for everyone to see," and then after a while, I thought about it. Well, maybe we can if we do this, this, and this. Like we redact all our evidence out, so you can't tell. And it's the way we do 20x is we do the validations, but on top of the validations on for each validation we have between 3 to 10 checks, right? So we look at each of those validations and we say, okay, is this true, is this true, is this true, is this true, on down the line. So we took all of our checks out of our public trusts. That way people couldn't tell exactly what we were testing. If you want to see that, then you can get a private view and sign all the proper paperwork to get into that environment, right? Um, so that to me kind of swayed me. But I tell you what, it did take me a minute to get there, because my traditional view, since we've been doing FedRAMP for so long, was a package included all the evidence. You know,
Yes.
all the screen captures, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And in this case, it's not screen captures, it's a script that runs that pulls JSON, so we can make it into a machine readable format. So, we don't publish that on our public side, but that is on our private side. So if people want to be able to see that. So, but it did shock me for a minute. And I talked to quite a few folks in the industry at that time. And I think everybody like took a step back. I mean, if you remember the forums when that first came out, it was
How
pretty
is this
hot
going
and
to happen?
heavy.
How would you
Yeah.
just
Yep.
conversation was hot and heavy. And,
Yeah.
Excentium is a 3PAO, but it's not
Mhm.
necessarily the primary thing we're doing, right? We're
Mhm.
a service provider to federal agencies working in a variety of ways, advisory capacity, but the company being founded on a simple premise that security leads to growth, right?
Yep. Enablement.
Reduce and the
Yep.
mission, and I've been living this mission. You have as well. It's to reduce
Mhm.
vulnerabilities in the nation's cyber infrastructure. Little ways
Absolutely.
that we
Yep.
can, and building relationships and networking and organizations with fellow folks on that mission, right?
Mhm.
And just
Mhm.
trying to learn from each other and capture the information. And I think that, you know, that thought process is more open now. In just the past year, consider the amount of openness with people who you compete directly with for business that has occurred, right? People who are absolutely communicating about their methodologies in public, whereas before, that was locked secrets. And if anybody, and there was a feeling as well, I know early on, that with companies that partner with government and commercial industry, that sharing the way 20x is and putting your pilot in public on the GitHub repos was just absolutely incredibly insert negative word here. Nobody wanted to do that. And I
I
remember,
inserted
having a
several
couple
negative words, by the way.
Yeah, and maybe inserted objects off of a desk. Um,
Yeah, pretty much.
yeah, and I remember explaining to a federal lead what 20x really was. Right,
Hmm.
Scotty Ross, great guy. He's a fantastic human, um, but I I like he went into a reboot loop. They're gonna do what? And like you could just see all of it processing at once, and just it's so antithetical to the way that FedRAMP has been done for so long, the way that other frameworks and governance and compliance requirements have been delivered. Uh,
Hmm.
that openness, that transparency, a year in, right? Yeah, a year into the concept, it looks like uh, we were in the dark ages with Rev 5 and the way that things were done.
I tell you what, it opened up our eyes in a way that allowed us to look at the problem set a little differently, right? And what we did is we took a look at the way, say, SOC 2 was done, or ISO 27000 was done, and you get your certification, right? But then there's a report that goes back behind it. Maybe you don't make that public, but you put your certification public. So that's your public facing piece. The same thing with your SOC 2 reports. They do a public facing one, and then they could do a kind of the private label one as well, right? So that's kind of how we started to look at it, and from a private perspective and a public perspective. I think we actually were probably a little bit too open in the very beginning on our public side, and then we pulled back a little bit on that as well. But I'm super happy, that we went all in on 20x and decided to go this route. Our engineers will even tell you half the stuff we had already developed, and we had scripts that we ran, to be able to prove to different 3PAOs. Uh, the problem was for us is then converting those that they could be machine readable and in a fashion that could be reportable. If you have a whole bunch of extra scripts that you run, which that's kind of how they were disjointed, scripts or lambdas or whatever, and then so we ended up kind of converting a lot of those into our first set for 20x. But it was still was a leap of faith from a technology perspective of what else that we had to develop. And some of the ones that we struggle with the most, from a 20x perspective weren't really the technical controls. It was more the proof to me that you're doing it consistently, or the word that they use, persistently, right? That was the harder part, and I still think it's hard to truly show that. If you have one or two incidents a year, or whatever the amount is, it's hard to demonstrate that you're doing that persistently, that you're doing the lessons learned, you're doing all those very constructive elements of a very solid incident response program, to be able to show that each
Yeah.
time in a logical way, that you can test. But for us, we have a ticketing system built right directly into our solution, so all that stuff is built right directly into the platform. So it makes it easier for us. So if you don't have the ticketing system built, you may figure out a different way to show that you're following the incident response, persistently managing your incident response with lessons learned and all the things that you need to be doing there as well. What do you think about some of those kind of harder, non-binary, one or zero kind of thing?
Yeah. I mean, obviously great for security, for
Hmm.
improving the visibility of work, allows
Right.
FedRAMP to have a better understanding of what the CSO is really operating like. And
Hmm.
Excentium was in 20x as well. We were a 3PAO for another platform.
Okay.
And some of the things that we learned in that process, you know, you're right that demonstrating persistence is, this was in a low pilot. Demonstrating persistence is difficult when you don't actually encounter the issue, if you haven't
Right.
yet had a reason to mitigate something.
Hmm.
Um, and we're operating across FedSpace in a few different vantage points, right? We're a service provider to federal agencies, right? And federal agencies are actually two of our long-standing 3PIO engagements are cloud services built by Gov for Gov,
Oh,
right?
okay.
And so these are just two of six that fall in that category. And federal agencies have a different viewpoint and sitting in that environment changes how security demonstration really works, right? And to ensure for a federal agency that the product that not only they're building but now they're consuming as well directly
Right.
is meeting all of these requirements. It that is definitely more the checkbox style solving. And so I think the big difficulty, to wrap back to your actual question, is the big difficulty is going to be having consumers of the products understand what their obligation, their shared responsibility to providing the information to the CSP is, because there is a little bit of that shadowed wall, and incidences happen on the customer side
Yep.
more often than on the provider side.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, there's a complexity there that we're still exploring, right? We haven't really dove in entirely. I do think as an outcome, right, rather than the functional pieces of how it's being delivered, as an outcome, those less technical things are really going to help demonstrate more, right? That the
Right.
security is there, that people can have trust in the system, that when they're building a CSO that incorporates a tool that has demonstrated their persistence towards the KSIs, it will overall increase security. But the how-to is really vague, as you said. And the way that it's done, we're going to see some innovative stuff, I think. There's
Right.
going to be a bunch of different ways that this is accomplished, innovative ways. And sometimes, you're going to find ways that didn't work, things that reporting didn't apply enough.
I will tell you that the first couple tries that we tried just didn't work.
Yeah.
They seem right on paper, but then when you actually went back to execute them, and they just didn't perform the way that you would think. This actually was a big discussion that I had back and forth with the PMO on this. I personally, and I'm still trying to figure this part out, even after doing this for a year now. To me, there's a difference between operational security and compliance, right?
Yeah.
And 20X is still a compliance program. I mean, it's a security program, but it really is a compliance program still. And I think some things are, operationally are different than compliance. And then one of the things that we talked about was, let's say I import a new a new system or a new container in, and my SBOM is a little bit different, or I have a vulnerability or two in that, but then I get it corrected like within the time limit of the Vader product, right? Or Vader,
Yeah.
right? Am I out of compliance, or am I in compliance? And do I need to report that, or do I need to say it's within the timelines? I think that's I personally think that's an operational security thing, and you don't need to truly report that as a violation or a not meeting, right? So there's going to be some boundaries that are going to occur over time, in my opinion,
Yeah.
that say, this is an operational thing, and it doesn't make your system any less secure, because guess what? You're following the rules. You're doing what you're supposed to be doing, and you're achieving ultimately the overall outcome is by making it secure within the time frame that you need to be making it. Now, granted, you don't want to go up to the wire
Yeah,
on
yeah. And to
so
contrast that to the way that it previously would be handled, right? You had an incident to report, you had to mitigate an issue, and the number of in Conmon in the agency side, right, as a recipient of continuous monitoring reports, the number of incidences or vulnerabilities that had to be documented or in a POAM,
deviation
and
request.
the times where effort was put to create a poem that was already for an issue that was solved weeks ago,
Right.
because it was only on the
That's
poem sheet for a day,
right.
few hours of a day, because as soon as it's identified, it's being resolved. And that hard documentation, yeah, is that operational security relevant, or is it just compliance, just that check boxes?
Right.
Um,
I think we should lean into the operational security perspective, and now there are going to be some people who take advantage of that, right? But I think more often than not, there are going to be folks who really want to follow the rule of operational security. and really focus on what do I need to do day to day? What do I need to do week to week? What do I need to do month to month? What do I need to do, once a quarter, perspective? And, if it falls within those, the criteria, do you really need to report that you were out of compliance? That's where it becomes real time monitoring for compliance. It may not be the best way to handle this. Right? I like the way they're doing it right now. Certain things need to be done every couple days. Certain things need to be done every on a weekly basis and so forth. They get a whole schedule for the different KSIs as well. I like
I think
that,
it'll be
and I think
interesting once they're talking more thoroughly about Class D, right?
yeah, hmm
How aggressive the intention will be to those timelines and mitigation obligations, and that I think is when we're really going to see the impact of the persistence, the
right,
consistent and uh, monitoring, the use of those trust centers and the reporting
hmm
dashboards are going to be really important over time, because there are a lot of systems right now that are FedRAMP authorized that the agency's utilizing them in ways that are, high on on CIA triad
right,
that
right, hmm
we don't know for 2 months currently, right? That's basically
right, because that's the reporting
the
mechanism, right, right.
right. And so while real-time reporting of the system security and the adherence feels like it could be onerous, right? Because like you just said, the concept we're talking about, do we have to report something that was out of
hmm
compliance for a day if we
Right,
mitigated it and solved it? But in some systems, yes, that knowing in an
exactly.
hour is going to be critical to the agencies who are responsible to those systems.
Yep,
And
yep,
it seems
agree.
as though overall, the federal agencies report to, right, and the
Hmm
organizations there are much more attentive and intentional about mitigating vulnerabilities, not just in FedRAMP, right? Um, you know, pointing my big finger at CMMC, these all
hmm
align really well, and the seriousness with which they're being taken is, while onerous in
hmm
ways, I think it's overall good for increasing security, right? And improving the security posture overall of our interconnected systems that are delivering, like, on federal information. It's pretty important to keep those in real time. And that is one of the biggest uh changes that has the most impact, I think the most positive impact on actually being security instead of just compliance, that 20X is delivering.
Yeah, and something that I like to talk about a lot as well. Sometimes when you report on everything, right, you get inundated with the alerts, right? And if you get
Mhm.
inundated with alerts, after a while, you become numb to them, and you don't see them. So if you're trying to do too much, um, from a let me just say in a larger perspective, like say you're an agency and you're trying to view what's going on overall. If you try to watch all the vulnerabilities from every single system at all times, then you as an agency in that monitoring capability, you're not going to be able to keep up, right? It's just not possible to keep up with all that. But now if you reported on, I'm gonna monitor these 200 systems, but what I'm really gonna monitor is whether or not they're staying within tolerance of
Yeah.
that check. That's much easier to monitor. And then if you see them go out of tolerance, how quickly can they bring it back into tolerance? That's a true I think mission of managed service providers or managed security service providers is to provide that tolerance. How can we get that tolerance down in a more automated fashion? Uh, but I think if people try to monitor every level of detail, then the alarms and knobs are going to be too hard for them to maintain. So focus on the things that are important. And I hear that from Pete all the time is focus on the things that are important, which is true. And sometimes things might be more important to me, than they are the PMO office because I've lived in this space for 40 years. So it's a day or two, right? So the cybersecurity space is definitely a passion for me, and trying to figure out how do you get the right amount of data in front of the right people at the right time. And that's the piece that I think we ultimately need to think about. So if you still continue to go back to the individual systems, this is great. I think 28 is going to be really good for that. What I truly think it's going to be great for is managing the 200 pieces as well, right? So if you can look at, the red, green, yellow indicators, it's going to be a lot easier to manage that, So does that make sense?
Oh, that totally does. And agencies will end up ingesting um, their own dashboard or building their own
Yep.
dashboards to be able
Hmm.
to ingest this information and highlight it to the right people. Because part of what you were saying, what's important to 3PAO to see, an IAS, Independent Assessment Service,
Hmm.
if we're going to move forward with the right language, right? That one's going to be tough. That's the
That one's
tough
going to
one
be
is
real hard.
yeah,
Exactly.
IAS. No, people are going to be like, what's that? Um, but,
Space shuttle or
and
something
what's
like that,
important
right?
even to the customer, our
Right.
customer is going to be different to the CSP that is going to be different to the agency customer,
Yep.
but there's going to be differences there too, because there's
Hmm.
some ISO who is assigned, 47 systems to make sure Conmon is being done appropriately. And the things that they're going to be looking out for that are critical and relevant to them, so much different than the privacy specialist who's also assigned to, I see that in the future where they'll break down those different roles and the different foci to individuals to monitor across lots of systems instead of it all being you know, one giant job of spending 7 days in a row reviewing the CIS CRM against the SSP and making sure that every single security control is documented in their system of record in a different verbiage.
Right.
So the focus is going to be able to change from that
Do you think we're going to see that
compliance.
though? Do you think that's going to happen in our lifetime or in our, you
I
know?
foresee it happening. There's a lot of change in leadership in the agencies, right?
Well, there's that. That's
There
definitely true. Yeah.
right, and there's different mentalities that really
Hmm.
strongly align with some of the speed and operationalization of information systems that
Hmm.
are
Hmm.
are prevalent right now in the federal government. So I do think that these people who are coming into roles that are just delivering on their career with the perspective that we need to move fast but do it right,
Hmm.
that they're going to see agencies that are high consumers of FedRAMP systems really treating it the way that we are right now, the way that
Hmm.
the industry is. Uh, there's so much value to it, right? Like if they can automate 70% of their tasking and really align to the important vulnerability criteria, the things that matter for the use case that they have it in, um, I think that there's going to be changes like that. It's going to take a couple of years, but I also feel maybe slightly pessimistically that it's going to take a couple of years for there to be uptake of 20x by
Yeah.
agencies.
Hmm.
That said, I mean, the PMO and there's agency leadership that's talking in public about being ready to do this, ready to ingest 20x, ready
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
dive in and see the automated validation, the persistent uh, validation of security controls. I know that a couple of agencies have built internal systems that do things like rely on other than FedRAMP certification to demonstrate security posture for authorization.
Right.
Um, Now, those agencies are still, beholden to adhere to the FedRAMP Authorization Act and use FedRAMP for cloud
Hmm. Hmm.
systems. But it's good to know that there's innovation in multiple agencies.
Right.
Another reason why we're going to see that is if you go on the FedRAMP marketplace and look at who sponsored or authorized what systems, a lot of smaller agencies just don't have the manpower. Simple as that
Correct.
to be able to
Hmm.
ingest a traditional FedRAMP package. It's a lot of work.
Hmm.
Agency in-kind spending on a FedRAMP ATO, even just a moderate, not even as the sponsor is big. As a sponsor agency, it's kind of astronomical.
Right.
Um,
Right.
yeah. And so when we have these smaller agencies who are going to see the advantage of automation, see the advantage of machine readable evidence and real-time conmon, um, they're definitely going to start consuming it. So I do think we'll see real real uptake on this in a short period of time, especially from the smaller consuming agencies on the FedRAMP marketplace.
You said something that I live and breathe by for sure here at Infusion Points, and it's you can do it fast and you can do it right at the same time, right? Matter of fact, I think you can do it fast and right easier today than you ever could, especially in cloud native systems, because cloud native, I mean, there's so many or the ability to pull the right logs out or to be able to check the metadata, on systems. It's just so much easier. Everything comes with APIs nowadays. So all you gotta do is be able to talk to that API, get the right authorization to get in and pull that information, and then you can pull that information back in a lot faster than you ever could today. And it's right. It's more right than it ever was when I transferred it here and I wrote about it there. Then I took about it on a diagram over here, and then I adjusted it based off of the vulnerabilities that were in the system, a week ago, right? So you could definitely do it
Hold on,
faster.
Bob's got the new ABD, but he's out for 2 days. So
Yeah, exactly.
we'll wait until Friday to see
We got to
that.
make
Don't
some
worry.
adjustments to that diagram because,
Yeah.
and we can't. We're being audited, so we're not allowed to touch the system for another couple weeks. But yet, now this the fast
Couple
but
weeks,
right.
couple months.
I think fast but right. I think is key, and actually and more secure. What I'd like to do is shift the conversation a little bit now to, all right, this is great. I love this. Right, this whole everybody knows who's listened to me once or twice knows I'm a big fan of 20X and what it's been able to produce. How do we now get other organizations to be able to see this as well? I mean, can we start to see maybe CMMC adopts something like this as well? Can we get the DoD to start looking at 20X or something like 20X to push, that through as well? I think that, we do probably half of our work is in the Department of Defense, helping customers through the IL4 and IL5, impact level 4 and impact level 5 perspective in the requirements that they need to meet to get there. The requirements, to be honest with you, are fairly similar to what they are in FedRAMP. There's some changes here and there. There's some software that you have to use versus what you can use. But to be honest with you, it's really about the time it takes to get somebody through that process. And we can help people get the technology right. We can help them get the processes right. We get the management pieces right. But it's been going through that process to demonstrate that you have met, the requirements for the DoD side. Do we see or can we see, them guys taking on this kind of effort? I think CMMC might be a little harder because of the nature of the customer base. So let's hold that one to the second part of the conversation, if that's okay with you. So
Yeah. So other organizations, I think that smart cloud native companies are building in ways, even if they have no intention right now of becoming FedRAMP certified. They're building systems in ways that, like you pointed out, cloud native systems make it so easy, right?
Yep.
An API call through their whole supply chain allows you to have outcome of the data flow and where the security is. I think, the choice, there are going to be companies that are not cloud native that are just going to be like, well, we're going Rev 5 and this is what we're going to do. And I think in 28, we're going to see Rev 5 continuing to 30 as well, right?
Yeah, I'm right there with you.
That engineering muscle answers both the FedRAMP and CMMC, especially if you're talking about level 2, right? Question. You've got the obligation to NIST 800-171, 172 just came out yesterday. R3 came out. You've got these obligations to FedRAMP from these companies, or for these companies to be CMMC, right? Let's talk about that. You have to be FedRAMP moderate equivalent, but you can't have any vulnerabilities and any unassessed controls, and you can't have or unimplemented controls, and you can't have POAMs to attain FedRAMP moderate, and it's in a time box. You only have a certain amount of time to be able to deliver any remediation you need when a 3PAO assesses you for FedRAMP moderate equivalent. So in ways right now, CMMC is more difficult to become FedRAMP moderate equivalent than getting a FedRAMP high. Right. So I think that DoD has demonstrated with CMMC that there is some openness to hear from industry. Not necessarily responsiveness to what they're hearing, but
Right.
they've heard.
Mm-hmm.
NIST as well is moving along with a lot of input from industry. Again, not responsiveness to that input, essentially. They're not saying, yes, we heard you and here's why, the way that
Mm-hmm.
FedRAMP is. But I do think that, again, a lot of different leadership inside of a lot of different organizations and agencies is going to lead to that faster, better the first time outcomes. And if they're looking to achieve those goals, then they're going to have to redirect their agencies and the programs that they manage and direct to be responsive to machine readability, to persistent validation. Again, it's going to be a journey. I mean, the FedRAMP journey so far has been 15 years,
Right.
right?
I was saying to somebody the other day that when FedRAMP first started, there was 1, then there were 2, then there were 3 certified systems, and there were 4 certified systems, and then 5, 6, 7, so forth and so on down the line. And then finally, next thing you know, there were 50, right? And then next thing you know there were 100, and then there was 200, and now there's how many? I mean, there's got to be close to getting 600 close now.
I think it's like 515 somewhere in there.
Okay,
right now.
So low
including the
fives right now.
20Xs.
Yep. And then we got a few more
Some
pilots
have
to
no
go through.
ingestion currently.
Right.
Some have no
Mhm.
federal use cases that they're applied to, but the
Right.
vast majority do. And if they're Rev 5, they're no longer listed if they don't have the sponsored use
Right.
case. That's a
Mhm.
difficulty. And this changes that too, right? I
Mhm.
think we're at a really great crossroads with the way that AI consumption in federal government spaces is increasing and being done in a moderately secure way, right?
Right. Mhm.
There's CMMC phase 2 is a big deal too. CMMC's been out for 9 years, 10 years,
Right.
right? And it's always been an obligation under DFARS. I think 2016. I'm still learning about CMMC. It's
That
relatively
sounds
very
about
new
right.
to me.
2016, 2017 was the year that I had to turn my inbound marketing off because I had so many DFARS customers coming in to meet the deadlines. I think it was December 17th, December 31st. I think everybody had to be
Yeah, and that was just for
DFARS
the
compliant.
level 1 self-attestation, making sure that things
Yep.
are right?
Mhm.
But so now that there's this big end date for 300,000 businesses, 80,000 of which are expected to require level 2 assessment, there's this rapid increased consumption of AI and FedRAMP 20X changes. Like, this is the backbone of information system security for the federal government in its most high and widespread use cases. We've got GSA making sounds about wanting to have CMMC
Yep.
equivalency,
We've seen that.
right?
Mhm. Mhm.
HHS is also talking a little bit about trying to bring
Mhm.
either a FedRAMP-like program to light
CUI
or
is a
CMMC.
national problem, right? It is not
Right.
just a DoD problem, right?
Yeah.
So
And it is really important for the average person, right? I mean, DoD CUI, yes, that is national security, but that's an abstract for us.
Mhm.
But when it's health and human services, when it's DSHS,
Right.
there's a real personalness to it that I
Mhm.
think average people can feel. And the more people that are learning about these requirements, these capabilities, I think that we're going to see a response that's positive from federal government.
Something else that they really need to focus on, in my opinion, right, is some of the requirements for certifiers, right? You have to have a certified person to do the assessment. So you have to have a senior FedRAMP specialist. And then you have to have a certified auditor for C3PAO. Well, what happens if my auditor has won each of those, right? And he audits me on FedRAMP, and all the evidence they collect on FedRAMP, they can't use now in the CMMC audit, because the CMMC audit has to be audited by a CMMC auditor, right?
Right.
So certified. So they can't take that evidence. So they have to go back and recollect all that evidence. So now we really are running people through 2 audits, and you can't do those combined audits. So somehow or another, they have to do some reciprocity as well through that auditor space as well. Not only just in the meeting the requirements, but it's demonstrating that you're meeting those requirements. So you have they're making firms do that twice if they're on the FedRAMP side. If they do they have the FedRAMP requirements, and then you also then have the CMMC requirements that you have to meet. So somehow that has to be brought out a little bit, and hopefully they'll make some adjustments to allow maybe both of those to occur, because they keep saying they're having troubles, with getting people registered. Well, maybe what they need to do is look at the other third party auditing capabilities and say, you know what, we'll accept FedRAMP auditors as well. Now, some people, well, it's totally different. No, it's not different, right? The requirements are the requirements, and how you interpret them are not going to be any different whether I'm a FedRAMP auditor or I'm a CMMC auditor. Same way when we deploy them. I don't care if it's a CMMC requirement or it's a FedRAMP requirement. If it tells me I got to do X, I'm deploying X, and I'm configuring it in a way that meets those requirements. I don't need a special hat.
Right. Well, and especially when, as we're discussing, you need that FedRAMP moderate equivalency to be assessed by a 3PAO, a FedRAMP 3PAO for CMMC. Right. And that has to be to my understanding, I could be wrong on this, but that has to be a separate party as well. It can't be. It can't be the same individual that's doing the CMMC.
It could be if they had both individual certifications. So if, say, I was an individual that I had the capability of being a senior auditor, inside of FedRAMP, and then I also have the C3PO widget, certification, then I could do both audits. But they're already struggling to have just the C3PAOs. How are you going to get people that spend the time? Because the education requirements are slightly different. The testing is different. One, you have to do the bottom or cybersecurity thing. The other thing, you have to do the event and training and testing, for the C3PAO. Somehow or another, they got to come together, in my opinion, in that as well. So not just from a requirements perspective, but also from an auditing perspective. So well, I think we're just starting to see some of those crashes. So
yeah, definitely. There's going to be a constriction of bandwidth for sure. Nobody's going to be able to deliver to these 80,000 companies that need to be CMMC level 2 by November. It's just not going to happen. And so the waiver system exists in DoD, so they can, allow service providers to continue doing so until capacity opens up far enough.
Right.
Similarly, and I think here's a key component to what you were saying, Gary, is that A2LA and FedRAMP were able to provide waivers for some of the requirements for 3PAOs and during the pilot processes. It's still to be seen if those are going to continue for 20X, but it's lowering the bar for, again, is it security or compliance? Lowering the bar for compliance for an auditor to deliver these audits, as opposed to lowering the security of it by taking away their skill sets, right? Or the skill requirements. It's more just the credentialing, and that for CMMC is tough, right? Like, that is a difficult thing because
it is.
That's administered by CPAs, right? And CPAs are definitely looking at what compliance looks like differently than a senior security engineer is.
Yep.
Yeah.
So as we get close to wrapping this up, how about some predictions from you? What do you see? If you had a crystal ball, what do you see this thing 3 years from now? Your hopes, dreams, and aspirations. Keep it that way, as opposed to
totally. So I foresee, let's call it 3 years, right? Let's call it 3 years. By 29, I foresee that the vast majority of agency use of systems will be through 20X, that there will be a sharp uptake in the next 18 months. And about that point, they'll have had time to really build systems that work right to be able to ingest and trust the systems that are certified. I would say, I think that this single community-based rule set, right, is going to continue. We'll have a lot of lessons learned but I don't think it's going to look very different than it does now. The persistent validation, the automation and machine readability is going to be more pervasive in industry than just inside of this framework, because it's a smart way to do it. And often where the federal government requirements lead, industry will follow and
Especially
adhere.
in the security space, right?
Especially in the security space, because, hey, maybe we're not doing business there now, but geez, it's smart. And look at all
Right.
the effort and resources that have been put into developing these processes and these pathways. Who wouldn't take advantage of somebody else putting that kind of time frame and effort into building what works? I do think that there will be a lot more alignment over the course of the next 2 years between CMMC and FedRAMP to some of the things that you're calling out as a wish list. I do think that the bars will align a little closer and that there will be crossover between the C3PAO and the FedRAMP 3PAO. I also foresee a really large increase in the systems that are on the marketplace, right?
Yes.
The FedRAMP PMO has said that they're expecting maybe 50 certifications by end of this calendar year. Unless, when Pete stated that at some point, he meant the fiscal year, in which case, hey, cool.
That's
But
October, right?
yeah, right. That's soon. That's real soon.
Yep.
The rules will have been out for a season, a single quarter.
Yes.
Yeah. I think then we're going to see probably a doubling next year. If
Awesome.
the PMO has the ability to handle that throughput.
We actually did that same
foresee
exercise here at the office, and that was kind of like the common theme, was doubling in size of the marketplace. So
Yeah.
I hope to see it, make it a
I
really
do too.
robust marketplace, and then be able to, the agencies be able to find what they want and have some competition to be able to leverage, across the board. The company X doesn't satisfy them, it's very easy to go to company Z.
Indeed.
So that's pretty cool. So.
And I also think that, 3 PAOs are going to have to make some shifts too. The people who are auditing on both of these. One shift that we already talked about is an increase in politeness and co-working and sharing of knowledge. That's not going to change, I don't think. There is a large enough market, I think, where that risk of being good friends with your competitors isn't going to be as much of a challenge as it might have once been. And, we're all concerned about conflict of interest. That's really important as well, to have those good relationships, to manage that and serve the customer needs. Because if the market's going to double, then we have a lot of throughput to be able to manage. There's a lot of customers that are going to need to be served that have CSOs. And ultimately it is, our customers, our federal customers, the whole industry's total customer. I'm really thinking, I've said it, I do think that the federal customer is going to have a strong opinion shift. About 18 months from now, everyone will be seeing the value of the new methodologies and these increase in turnaround times, the increase of availability for them to deliver on their missions. They will certainly jump in. Yeah, we can visit it at the tail of 29 to see how close we are.
We'll come back then and we'll double check, right? So
hopefully we come back before then too.
There you go.
The work ahead is methodological, right? You've got to change the methodology by which we're delivering work, but it's not very different from what everybody's been doing so far. It's just, in fact, easier in some ways once you have the systems and the engineering in place. And then, there's more availability for everybody.
And the more times you do it, the better it feels. The more times you do it, the easier it gets, the more recognizable it gets, the easier it is for people to understand, right? And then accept it. That's where we need to get to. So I've got 2 or 3 other additional questions for you if you want to take them on. They're a little more personal in nature in some ways, but
for sure.
Yeah, there you go. Tell me, like, one of your favorite books, or one of the biggest book that you recommend here lately.
All right. So, Excentium leadership pointed me towards a couple of great books. One is Traction.
Great book
by Hyatt, I believe. Awesome book. I'm about a quarter of the way through. That's the nonfiction, the work related stuff. Fiction wise, One of my all-time favorite books is a book, I don't know the author, but the title is As the Crow Flies.
Okay.
And it is a early 18th century fruit merchant with a cart who ends up owning a conglomerate of department stores across the world. His journey
Oh,
is just
wow.
really cool. It's a really great story of perseverance
Oh, I
and
love that.
climbing a lot of tough hills and approaching challenges.
One of
Um,
our core values here is grit, be gritty, right? So you got to hang in there and show that you can get something done. Perseverance. I used to say patience, perseverance, and patience. So you hang in there and you can get it done. So and I changed it over
I
to
try to
grit because
practice
it's
patience every day.
yeah.
I have this thing, right? Since we're doing personal stuff, one of my favorite things is if I'm in the grocery store, and again, I'm a single dad, I'm
Right.
there a lot. It's just the way it goes. Uh, and if I
Especially with
have
teenagers,
just a
right?
yeah. If I have just a couple, or if I have a lot of groceries, I like to let the next person go ahead of me.
Mm,
And especially if they've only got a couple of things, right? I hate
right,
being
right.
I hate having two things standing behind somebody with a cart full of
Yep.
groceries.
I'm right there with you.
So
Yep.
when I do, I let them know, hey, look, I promise it's a good thing for me. I'm practicing patience here. I'm just, making sure that I can do this. I can be in a
Hmm.
situation that maybe at another point in my life might have made me impatient. And
Right.
that spreads throughout all the aspects of my life.
There you go. There you go. How about a TV show or a movie that you've recently watched that you'd recommend?
Um, I'm not a really a TV and movies
Okay.
kind of guy, but I will say that the Dune movies are
Ah,
pretty phenomenal visually.
oh
Uh,
yes.
yeah, not
The sound
fully
too.
true to the books, but
Yeah.
you know, even Frank Herbert's son isn't as true to the books as he could be.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. My wife and I watched a movie called Apex on Netflix the other night. Fast paced, action packed, just make your knees wobble.
Yeah.
If you like those kind of movies. Yeah.
Yeah,
So I
I
really,
like to go for the content that I have some love for, like Dune,
uh-huh.
right? But
Yep.
generally I find myself if I'm watching TV, I'm like, oh, I could be writing something. I could
Ah.
be studying something right now. There's, I could
Yeah,
be
well, I do both
cleaning.
at the same time, so
Yeah, there's that
it's the
too.
reason
There's that
why I
too.
mentioned my writing up front, it's the 3rd grade level. It's because I'm so inundated with watching movies like Apex, so
Yeah, but you have the verbal communication. It's
there you
you're
go, there
capturing
you
that
go.
verbal communication mechanisms. Yeah.
That's it. I'm a visual kinda guy, so the last one is along the lines of we're a services-based kinda company, and, we help a lot of nonprofits around. I don't know if you do any of that. If you do, and you wanna, give a shout out to what you do, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I am recently engaging quite a bit in understanding how nonprofits serve my local community.
Mhm.
I'm here in Olympia, Washington, and some of the concerns here for a lot of folks that nonprofits that I've encountered serve are cybersecurity
Oh,
for
yeah.
nonprofits.
Mhm.
So I do have this goal of being able to serve my local community with providing insight, guidance, tools at low or no cost to the nonprofits in my community, right? So that they can, there's so many nonprofits that, they take down people's names that need assistance on a piece of paper and then they
Yes.
throw it
Ah,
into a
man.
Google Doc and
Mm.
then they share it out later on to some other organization and printed out lists of names of folks and orgs that can help. They're doing good work, right? For the vast majority of times, if you keep up with, nonprofits,
Yep.
there's challenges all over the place. But um, this is a challenge for massive corporations that have large pockets of resources. It's certainly a challenge for some organization that's trying to pay somebody a full-time wage, maybe a couple people on $250,000 worth of grants a year,
Right.
right?
Right,
It's
exactly. Yeah.
difficult. Yeah.
It is, it is.
I don't want to
I
call
I
out any particular ones, but
no,
that's my goal is
that's
to be
fine. No,
able to be in
I
a
think that's
position to do that.
awesome. I think that's awesome because I know, we support several, nonprofits around here, and I'm the unsung hero. I just never thought about the cybersecurity stuff that I always do as well, or even the IT stuff that I do, as well as being a good service for them, because they definitely need it. Most of the time,
Right.
they don't understand the problems they're even getting into. So
Well, here's the next conversation for us, Gary.
there you
Figure
go.
out an easy packageable tool set that we can get into the hands of the nonprofits we
And I
know that
actually know
can.
another guy who James Leach from Fortrium. He does something very similar, but he does it in a very organized way, for the less fortunate, not just nonprofits, but for the less fortunate as well. So I think maybe several of us could get our heads together, and maybe we can come up with some good charity around helping cybersecurity for nonprofits or less fortunate as well. Maybe
Yeah.
I'll
Oh,
ping
there's a
him and
lot of
see if we can get.
education out there.
Yep.
Information's
Yep.
easy to get, right?
Oh, it
That's
is.
easy to get, but implementing tool sets, that's hard.
Yes.
Implementing and finding the right tool that's going to help easily, that's difficult. And again, outside of the purview of that poor, that person who's stuck with a challenging opportunity
Yep.
to deliver services to their community. And that's the focus. So they're putting all their time, attention, and effort and energy into that.
Well, I
Great
thoroughly
question.
enjoyed our conversation, and I truly appreciate you attending an episode of Behind the Shield. I really do appreciate it. And that's all we have for today. I may not always be the one on Behind the Shield, but there will be somebody from Infusion Points behind the shield in these types of conversations. Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks.
Yep. Thank you.